Okay. What up is over when I'm gone tonight? Okay.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host PIN. When finished, press the pound key.
The PIN you entered does not match the PIN you have on file for your account.
Oh.
Please re-enter your PIN. The PIN you entered does not match the PIN you have on file for your account. Please re-enter your PIN.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. Okay, let's try this again.
Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. Please enter your host PIN. When finished, press the pound key.
To start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Coming at you live from the beautiful heartland, these good old United States of America, right at the confluence of the mighty Mississippi and the majestic Missouri rivers, St. Charles, Missouri. This is the Rant. I am your host, Charles Lamson. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours. Today is Saturday, 13th day of July, the year of our Lord, 2019. Today's topic is part 11 of Planning Pays, Economics and Personal Finance. The first half of the big show, we're going to be I'm going to have a little seance, and I'm going to channel the spirit live on air, channel the spirit of Alfred Marshall, famous economist. And he's going to talk about his principles of economics in the first half of the big show. Second half, we're going to close the seance and send his soul, his economist soul, straight back to the depths of hell where it belongs. And then I'm going to be talking about personal financial planning in contemporary modern day America, or modern day Earth for that matter. Don't matter what country you're in, you can practice these principles. Well, some of them don't translate very well into other countries, but you get what I'm trying to say. A lot of these rules are, especially with, Alfred Marshall, a lot of his stuff, I guess, would be more on a universal scale. When you're talking about the economies of nations and whatnot. But also, those of you who are just tuning in via Blog Talk Radio, you got to bear in mind, I'm sort of doing a simulcast over here. So usually when I'm having my little seances here, channeling spirits and whatnot, what you may not know in the radio audience is that I'm just a proactive guy. I'm over here exercising, actually. I do it. So those of you who catch the show on YouTube, well, you're in for a special treat because I'm going to be doing 50-year-old crippled guy fitness instructional video supplement to go live, to go along with the dead. Alfred Marshall, that's right. While he's reading, while he's talking about his principles of economics. That's what you have to look forward to. Okay, so once again, I just use pretty much very lightweight. So this stage in the game, not really looking to build too much muscle. I mean, I would love to build all the muscle I could, being 50 years old, but the sad fact of life, ladies and gentlemen, is we produce a lot less testosterone, us guys, as we get older, and so it's pretty unrealistic to think you're going to pile on tons of muscle. So really, what I go for nowadays, I just get the lightweight. I got like a little 10-pound therapeutic bar, and I just go for like a good stretch. I like to just get my muscles all stretched out, and then just keep moving for as long as I can. I do do a lot of reps, and I do breaks in between my sets. I just count 30 respirations, so that's about 60 seconds. And so yeah, I'm going to be doing some supersets. I'm going to be combining. Once again, they're kind of screwed up or tricep extensions. It's more of a stretch, upper abdominal stretch. You'll see what I'm talking about. But not expecting great things out of today's workout. Whoa. But I actually am starting to feel a little bit more energy now. I was really feeling sluggish earlier, but I had just finished eating, so I didn't know how this was going to turn out. But I'm starting to get some more energy now. Drinking my purified water. This is a must in every fitness regimen. Well, it's not a must. I just started doing it in the last couple of months. Getting a really good water purifier. It's been being serious about my pineal gland health lately, and taking iodine supplementation, getting rid of all the fluoride. No fluoride in this water, and toothpaste, fluoride-free toothpaste. Cutting the fluoride complete that calcifies your pineal gland, and that's just a part. Right there in my brain area that I want to be using more of. Iodine supplementation is supposed to be good for that as well, for the pineal gland. So, those are your little tips for the day. We're going to see if I can summon the spirit of Alfred Marshall here. Alfred, come to us. Teach us of your principles of economics.
Of this old-fashioned kind. Technical education is, however, outgrowing its mistakes, and is aiming, firstly, at giving a general command over the use of eyes and fingers, though there are signs that this work is being taken over by general education, to which it properly belongs, and secondly, at imparting artistic skill and knowledge, and methods of investigation, which are useful in particular occupations, but are seldom properly acquired in the course of practical work. It is, however, to be remembered that every advance in the accuracy and versatility of automatic machinery narrows the range of manual work in which command over hand and eye is at high premium, and that those faculties which are trained by general education in its best forms are ever rising in importance. Footnote. As Naismith says, if a lad, having dropped 2 peas at random on a table, can readily put a 3rd pea midway in a line between them, he is on the way to becoming a good mechanic. Command over eye and hand is gained in the ordinary English games, no less than in the playful work of the kindergarten. Drawing has always been on the borderline between work and play. End of footnote.
Okay.
According to the best English opinions, technical education for the higher ranks of industry should keep the aim of developing the faculties almost as constantly before it as general education does. It should rest on the same basis as a thorough general education, but should go on to work out in detail special branches of knowledge for the benefit of particular trades. Our aim should be to add the scientific training in which the countries of Western Europe are ahead of us, to that daring and restless energy and those practical instincts which seldom flourish unless the best years of youth are spent in the workshop, recollecting always that whatever a youth learns for himself by direct experience in well-conducted works teaches him more and stimulates his mental activity more than if it were taught him by a master in a technical school with model instruments. Footnotes. For training to benefit particular trades, one of the weakest points of technical education is that it does not educate the sense of proportion and the desire for simplicity of detail. The English, and to an even greater extent the Americans, have acquired in actual business the faculty of rejecting intricacies in machinery and processes which are not worth what they cost, and practical instinct of this kind often enables them to succeed in competition with continental rivals who are much better educated. For the benefit of training in a workshop. A good plan is that of spending the 6 winter months of several years after leaving school in learning science in college, and the 6 summer months as articled pupils in large workshops. The present writer introduced this plan about 40 years ago at University College Bristol, now the University of Bristol. But it has practical difficulties which can be overcome only by the cordial and generous cooperation of the heads of large firms with the college authorities. Another excellent plan is that adopted in the school attached to the works of Messrs. Mather and Platt at Manchester. Quote, "The drawings made in the school are of work actually in progress in the shops. One day the teacher gives the necessary explanations and calculations, and the next day the scholars see, as it were on the anvil, the very thing which has been the subject of his lecture." End quote. End of footnote.
Oh.
The old apprenticeship system is not exactly suited to modern conditions, and it has fallen into disuse, but a substitute for it is wanted. Within the last few years, many of the ablest manufacturers have begun to set the fashion of making their sons work through every stage in succession of the business they will ultimately have to control. But this splendid education can be had only by a few. So many and various are the branches of any great modern industry that it would be impossible for the employers to undertake, as they used to do, that every youth committed to their care should learn all, and indeed a lad of ordinary ability would be bewildered by the attempt. But it does not seem impracticable to revive the apprenticeship system in a modified form. Footnote. The employer binds himself to see that the apprentice is thoroughly taught in the workshop all the subdivisions of one great division of his trade, instead of letting him learn only one of these subdivisions, as too often happens now. The apprentice's training would then often be as broad as if he had been taught the whole of the trade as it existed a few generations ago, and it might be supplemented by a theoretical knowledge of all branches of the trade, acquired in a technical school. Something resembling the old apprenticeship system has recently come into vogue for young Englishmen who desire to learn the business of farming under the peculiar conditions of a new country. And there are some signs that the plan may be extended to the business of farming in this country, for which it is in many respects admirably adapted. But there remains a great deal of education suitable to the farmer and to the farm labourer which can best be given in agricultural colleges and dairy schools. Meanwhile, many great agencies for the technical education of adults are being rapidly developed, such as public exhibitions, trade associations and congresses, and trade journals. Each of them has its own work to do. In agriculture and some other trades, the greatest aid to progress is perhaps found in public shows. But those industries which are more advanced and in the hands of persons of studious habits owe more to the diffusion of practical and scientific knowledge by trade journals, which, aided by changes in the methods of industry and also in its social conditions, are breaking up trade secrets and helping men of small means in competition with their richer rivals. End of footnote. The great epoch-making inventions in industry came till recently almost exclusively from England. But now other nations are joining in the race. The excellence of the common schools of the Americans, the variety of their lives, the interchange of ideas between different races among them, and the peculiar conditions of their agriculture have developed a restless spirit of inquiry, while technical education is now being pushed on with great vigour. On the other hand, the diffusion of scientific knowledge among the middle and even the working classes of Germany, combined with their familiarity with modern languages and their habits of travelling in pursuit of instruction, has enabled them to keep up with the English and American mechanics and to take the lead in many of the applications of chemistry to business. Footnote. The heads of almost every progressive firm on the continent have carefully studied processes and machinery in foreign lands. The English are great travellers, but partly perhaps on account of their ignorance of other languages, they seem hardly to set enough store on the technical education that can be gained by the wise use of travel. End of footnote. Section 5. It is true that there are many kinds of work which can be done as efficiently by an uneducated as by an educated workman, and that the higher branches of education are of little direct use except to employers and foremen and a comparatively small number of artisans. But a good education confers great indirect benefits even on the ordinary workman. It stimulates his mental activity. It fosters in him a habit of wise inquisitiveness. It makes him more intelligent, more ready, more trustworthy in his ordinary work. It raises the tone of his life in working hours and out of working hours. It is thus an important means towards the production of material wealth, at the same time that, regarded as an end in itself, it is inferior to none of those which the production of material wealth can be made to subserve. We must, however, look in another direction for a part, perhaps the greater part, of the immediate economic gain which the nation may derive from an improvement in the general and technical education of the mass of the people. We must look not so much at those who stay in the rank and file of the working classes, as at those who rise from a humble birth to join the higher ranks of skilled artisans, to become foremen or employers, to advance the boundaries of science, or possibly to add to the national wealth in art and literature. The laws which govern the birth of genius are inscrutable. It is probable that the percentage of children of the working classes who are endowed with natural abilities of the highest order is not so great as that of the children of people who have attained or have inherited a higher position in society. But since the manual labour classes are 4 or 5 times as numerous as all other classes put together, it is not unlikely that more than half of the best natural genius that is born into the country belongs to them. And of this, a great part is fruitless for want of opportunity. There is no extravagance more prejudicial to the growth of national wealth than that wasteful negligence which allows genius that happens to be born of lowly parentage to expend itself in lowly work. No change would conduce so much to the rapid increase of material wealth as an improvement in our schools, and especially those of the middle grades, provided it be combined with an extensive system of scholarships which will enable the clever son of a working man to rise gradually from school to school till he has the best theoretical and practical education which the age can give. To the abilities of children of the working classes may be ascribed the greater part of the success of the free towns in the Middle Ages and of Scotland in recent times. Even within England itself, there is a lesson of the same kind to be learnt. Progress is most rapid in those parts of the country in which the greatest proportion of the leaders of industry are the sons of working men. For instance, the beginning of the manufacturing era found social distinctions more closely marked and more firmly established in the south than in the north of England. In the south, something of a spirit of caste has held back the working men and the sons of working men from rising to posts of command, and the old established families have been wanting in that elasticity and freshness of mind which no social advantage can supply, and which comes only from natural gifts. This spirit of caste, and this deficiency of new blood among the leaders of industry, have mutually sustained one another, and there are not a few towns in the south of England whose decadence within living memory can be traced in a great measure to this cause. Section 6. Education in art stands on a somewhat different footing from education in hard thinking, for while the latter nearly always strengthens the character, the former not unfrequently fails to do this. Nevertheless, the development of the artistic faculties of the people is in itself an aim of the very highest importance, and is becoming a chief factor of industrial efficiency. We are here concerned almost exclusively with those branches of art which appeal to the eye. For though literature and music combine as much and more to the fullness of life, yet their development does not directly affect and does not depend upon the methods of business, the processes of manufacture, and the skill of artisans. The artisan of Europe in the Middle Ages, and of Eastern countries now, has perhaps obtained credit for more originality than he has really possessed. Eastern carpets, for instance, are full of grand conceptions, but if we examine a great many examples of the art of any one place, selected perhaps from the work of several centuries, we often find very little variety in their fundamental ideas. But in the modern era of rapid changes, some caused by fashion and some by the beneficial movements of industrial and social progress, everyone feels free to make a new departure. Everyone has to rely, in the main, on his own resources. There is no slowly matured public criticism to guide him. Footnote. In fact, every designer in a primitive age is governed by precedent. Only very daring people depart from it, even when they do not depart far, and their innovations are subjected to the test of experience, which in the long run is infallible. For though the crudest and most ridiculous fashions in art and in literature will be accepted by the people for a time at the bidding of their social superiors, nothing but true artistic excellence has enabled a ballad or a melody, a style of dress or a pattern of furniture to retain its popularity among a whole nation for many generations together. These innovations, then, which were inconsistent with the true spirit of art, were suppressed, and those that were on the right track were retained, and became the starting point for further progress. And thus traditional instincts played a great part in preserving the purity of the industrial art in Oriental countries, and to a less extent in medieval Europe. End of footnote. This is, however, not the only, perhaps not the chief disadvantage under which artistic design labours in our own age. There is no good reason for believing that the children of ordinary workmen in the Middle Ages had more power of artistic origination than those of ordinary village carpenters or blacksmiths of today. But if one among 10,000 happened to have genius, it found vent in his work, and was stimulated by the competition of the guilds and in other ways. But the modern artisan is apt to be occupied in the management of machinery, and though the faculties which he develops may be more solid and may help more in the long run towards the highest progress of the human race than did the taste and fancy of his medieval predecessor, yet they do not contribute directly towards the progress of art. And if he should find in himself a higher order of ability than among his fellows, he will probably endeavour to take a leading part in the management of a trades union or some other society, or to collect together a little store of capital and to rise out of that trade in which he was educated. These are not ignoble aims, but his ambition would perhaps have been nobler and more fruitful of good to the world if he had stayed in his old trade and striven to create works of beauty which should live after he had gone. It must, however, be admitted that he would have great difficulties in doing this. The shortness of the time which we allow ourselves for changes in the arts of decoration is scarcely a greater evil than the width of the area of the world over which they are spread, for that causes a further distraction of the hasty and hurried efforts of the designer, by compelling him to be always watching the world movements of the supply of and demand for art products. This is a task for which the artisan, who works with his own hands, is not well fitted. And in consequence nowadays, the ordinary artisan finds it best to follow and not to lead. Even the supreme skill of the lion's weaver shows itself now almost exclusively in an inherited power of delicate manipulation and fine perception of colour that enable him to carry out perfectly the ideas of professional designers. Increasing wealth is enabling people to buy things of all kinds to suit the fancy, but with a secondary regard to their powers of wearing, so that in all kinds of clothing and furniture, it is every day more true that it is the pattern which sells the things. The influence of the late William Morris and others, combined with the lead which many English designers have derived from Oriental and especially Persian and Indian masters of colour, is acknowledged by Frenchmen themselves to have attained the first rank for certain classes of English fabrics and decorative products. But in other directions, France is supreme. Some English manufacturers who hold their own against the world would, it is said, be driven out of the market if they had to depend on English patterns. This is partly due to the fact that Paris, having the lead in fashions, as the result of an inherited quick and subtle taste in women's dress, a Parisian design is likely to be in harmony with the coming fashions and to sell better than a design of equal intrinsic worth from elsewhere. Footnote. French designers find it best to live in Paris. If they stay for long out of contact with the central movements of fashion, they seem to fall behindhand. Most of them have been educated as artists, but have failed of their highest ambition. It is only in exceptional cases, as for instance for the Sèvres china, that those who have succeeded as artists find it worth their while to design. Englishmen can, however, hold their own in designing for Oriental markets, and there is evidence that the English are at least equal to the French in originality, though they are inferior in quickness in seeing how to group forms and colours so as to obtain an effective result. It is probable that the profession of the modern designer has not yet risen to the best position which it is capable of holding, for it has been to a disproportionate extent under the influence of one nation, and that nation is one whose works in the highest branches of art have seldom borne to be transplanted. They have indeed often been applauded and imitated at the time by other nations, but they have as yet seldom struck a keynote for the best work of later generations. End of footnote. Technical education, then, though it cannot add much directly to the supply of genius in art any more than it can in science or in business, can yet save much natural artistic genius from running to waste. And it is called on to do this all the more because the training that was given by the older forms of handicraft can never be revived on a large scale. Footnote. The painters themselves have put on record in the portrait galleries the fact that in medieval times, and even later, their art attracted a larger share of the best intellect than it does now, when the ambition of youth is tempted by the excitement of modern business, when its zeal for imperishable achievements finds a field in the discoveries of modern science, and lastly, when a great deal of excellent talent is insensibly diverted from high aims by the ready pay to be got by hastily writing half-thoughts for periodical literature. End of footnote. Section 7. We may then conclude that the wisdom of expending public and private funds on education is not to be measured by its direct fruits alone. It will be profitable as a mere investment, to give the masses of the people much greater opportunities than they can generally avail themselves of. For by this means, many who would have died unknown are enabled to get the start needed for bringing out their latent abilities. And the economic value of one great industrial genius is sufficient to cover the expenses of the education of a whole town. For one new idea, such as Bessemer's chief invention, adds as much to England's productive power as the labour of 100,000 men. Less direct, but not less in importance, is the aid given to production by medical discoveries, such as those of Jenner or Pasteur, which increase our health and working power, and again by scientific work such as that of mathematics or biology, even though many generations may pass away before it bears visible fruit in greater material well-being. All that is spent during many years in opening the means of higher education to the masses would be well paid for if it called out one more Newton or Darwin, Shakespeare or Beethoven. There are few practical problems in which the economist has a more direct interest than those relating to the principles on which the expense of the education of children should be divided between the state and the parents. But we must now consider the conditions that determine the power and the will of the parents to bear their share of the expense, whatever it may be. Most parents are willing to do for their children what their own parents did for them, and perhaps even to go a little beyond it if they find themselves among neighbours who happen to have a rather higher standard. But to do more than this requires, in addition to the moral qualities of unselfishness and a warmth of affection that are perhaps not rare, a certain habit of mind which is as yet not very common. It requires the habit of distinctly realizing the future, of regarding a distant event as of nearly the same importance as if it were close at hand, discounting the future at low rate of interest. This habit is at once a chief product and a chief cause of civilization, and is seldom fully developed except among the middle and upper classes of the more cultivated nations. Section 8. Parents generally bring up their children to occupations in their own grade, and therefore the total supply of labour in any grade in any one generation is in a great measure determined by the numbers in that grade in the preceding generation. Yet within the grade itself there is a greater mobility. If the advantages of any one occupation in it rise above the average, there is a quick influx of youth from other occupations within the grade. The vertical movement from one grade to another is seldom very rapid or on a very large scale. But when the advantages of a grade have risen relatively to the difficulty of the work required of it, many small streams of labour, both youthful and adult, will begin to flow towards it, and though none of them may be very large, they will together have a sufficient volume to satisfy before long the increased demand for labour in that grade. We must defer to a later stage fuller discussion of the obstacles which the conditions of any place and time oppose to the free mobility of labour, and also of the inducements which they offer to anyone to change his occupation or to bring up his son to an occupation different from his own. But we have seen enough to conclude that, other things being equal, an increase in the earnings that are to be got by labour increases its rate of growth, or in other words, a rise in its demand price increases the supply of it. If the state of knowledge and of ethical, social and domestic habits be given, then the vigour of the people as a whole, if not their numbers, and both the numbers and vigour of any trade in particular, may be said to have a supply price in this sense, that there is a certain level of the demand price which will keep them stationary, that a higher price would cause them to increase, and that a lower price would cause them to decrease. Thus, economic causes play a part in governing the growth of population as a whole, as well as the supply of labour in any particular grade. But their influence on the numbers of the population as a whole is largely indirect, and is exerted by way of the ethical, social, and domestic habits of life. For these habits are themselves influenced by economic causes deeply, though slowly, and in ways some of which are difficult to trace and impossible to predict. Footnote. Mill was so much impressed by the difficulties that beset a parent in the attempt to bring up his son to an occupation widely different in character from his own, that he said, "So complete, indeed, has hitherto been the separation, so strongly marked the line of demarcation between the different grades of labourers, as to be almost equivalent to an hereditary distinction of caste. each employment being chiefly recruited from the children of those already employed in it, or in employments of the same rank with it in social estimation, or from the children of persons who, if originally of a lower rank, have succeeded in raising themselves by their exertions.
Okay.
The liberal professions are mostly supplied by the sons of either the professional or the idle classes. The more highly skilled manual employments are filled up from the sons of skilled artisans, or the class of tradesmen who rank with them. The lower classes of skilled employments are in a similar case, and unskilled labourers, with occasional exceptions, remain from father to son in their pristine condition. Consequently, the wages of each class have hitherto been regulated by the increase of its own population, rather than that of the general population of the country. But he goes on, the changes, however, now so rapidly taking place in usages and ideas, are undermining all these distinctions. His prescience has been vindicated by the progress of change since he wrote. The broad lines of division which he pointed out have been almost obliterated by the rapid action of those causes which, as we saw earlier in the chapter, are reducing the amount of skill and ability required in some occupations and increasing it in others. We cannot any longer regard different occupations as distributed among 4 great planes, but we may perhaps think of them as resembling a long flight of steps of unequal breadth, some of them being so broad as to act as landing stages. Or even better still, we might picture to ourselves 2 flights of stairs, one representing the hard-handed industries and the other the soft-handed industries, because the vertical division between these 2 is in fact as broad and as clearly marked as the horizontal division between any 2 grades. Mill's classification had lost a great part of its value when Cairnes adopted it. A classification more suited to our existing conditions is offered by Giddings. It is open to the objection that it draws broad lines of division where nature has made no broad lines, but it is perhaps as good as any division of industry into 4 grades can be. His divisions are 1. Automatic manual labour, including common labourers and machine tenders. 2. Responsible manual labour, including those who can be entrusted with some responsibility and labour of self-direction. 3. Automatic brain workers, such as bookkeepers. And 4. Responsible brain workers, including the superintendents and directors. The conditions and methods of the large and incessant movement of the population upwards and downwards from grade to grade are studied more fully below. The growing demand for boys to run errands and to do other work that has no educational value has increased the danger that parents may send their sons into avenues that have no outlook for good employment in later years, and something is being done by public agency, and more by the devotion and energy of men and women in unofficial association in giving out notes of warning against such blind alley occupations, and assisting lads to prepare themselves for skilled work. These efforts may be of great national value, but care must be taken that this guidance and help is as accessible to the higher strains of the working class population when in need of it as to the lower, lest the race should degenerate. End of footnote. End of chapter 6.
Chapter 7 of Principles of Economics, Book 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Principles of Economics, Book 4, by Alfred Marshall. Chapter 7, The Growth of Wealth. In this chapter, it is not necessary to distinguish the points of view in which wealth is regarded as the object of consumption and as an agent of production. We are concerned with the growth of wealth simply, and we have no need to emphasize its uses as capital. The earliest forms of wealth were probably implements for hunting and fishing, and personal ornaments, and in cold countries, clothing and huts. During this stage, the domestication of animals began. But at first, they were probably cared for chiefly for their own sake, because they were beautiful, and it was pleasant to have them. They were, like articles of personal ornament, desired because of the immediate gratification to be derived from their possession, rather than as a provision against future needs. Gradually, the herds of domesticated animals increased, and during the pastoral stage, they were at once the pleasure and the pride of their possessors, the outward emblems of social rank, and by far the most important store of wealth accumulated as provision against future needs. As numbers thickened and the people settled down to agriculture, cultivated land took the first place in the inventory of wealth, and that part of the value of the land which was due to improvements, among which wells held a conspicuous place, became the chief element of capital in the narrower sense of the term. Next in importance came houses, domesticated animals, and in some places boats and ships. But the implements of production, whether for use in agriculture or in domestic manufactures, remained for a long time of little value. In some places, however, precious stones and the precious metals in various forms became early a leading object of desire and a recognized means of hoarding wealth. While, to say nothing of the palaces of monarchs, a large part of social wealth in many comparatively rude civilizations took the form of edifices for public purposes, chiefly religious, and of roads and bridges, of canals and irrigation works. For some thousands of years, these remained the chief forms of accumulated wealth. In towns, indeed, houses and household furniture took the first place, and stocks of the more expensive of raw materials counted for a good deal. But though the inhabitants of the towns had often more wealth per head than those of the country, their total numbers were small, and their aggregate wealth was very much less than that of the country. During all this time, the only trade that used very expensive implements was the trade of carrying goods by water. The weaver's looms, the husbandman's plows, and the blacksmith's anvils were of simple construction and were of little account beside the merchant's ships. But in the 18th century, England inaugurated the era of expensive implements. The implements of the English farmer had been rising slowly in value for a long time, but the progress was quickened in the 18th century. After a while, the use first of water power and then of steam power caused the rapid substitution of expensive machinery for inexpensive hand tools in one department of production after another. As in earlier times, the most expensive implements were ships, and in some cases canals for navigation and irrigation. So now they are the means of locomotion in general. Railways and tramways, canals, docks and ships, telegraph and telephone systems, and waterworks. Even gasworks might almost come under this head, on the ground that a great part of their plant is devoted to distributing the gas. After these come mines and iron and chemical works, shipbuilding yards, printing presses, and other large factories full of expensive machinery. On whichever side we look, we find that the progress and diffusion of knowledge are constantly leading to the adoption of new processes and new machinery, which economize human effort on condition that some of the effort is spent a good while before the attainment of the ultimate ends to which it is directed. It is not easy to measure this progress exactly, because many modern industries had no counterpart in ancient times. But let us compare the past and present conditions of the four great industries, the products of which have not changed their general character, namely agriculture, the building, the cloth making, and the carrying trades. In the first two of these, handwork still retains an important place, but even in them there is a great development of expensive machinery. Compare, for instance, the rude implements of an Indian ryot, even of today, with the equipment of a progressive lowland farmer. And consider the brick-making, mortar-making, sawing, planing, molding, and slotting machines of a modern builder, his steam cranes and his electric light. And if we turn to the textile trades, or at least to those of them which make the simpler products, we find each operative in early times content with implements the cost of which was equivalent to but a few months of his labor, while in modern times it is estimated that for each man, woman, and child employed, there is a capital in plant alone of more than 200 pounds, or say the equivalent of 5 years' labor. Again, the cost of a steamship is perhaps equivalent to the labor for 15 years or more of those who work her, while the capital of about 1 billion pounds invested in railways in England and Wales is equivalent to the work for more than 20 years of the 300,000 wage earners employed on them. As civilization has progressed, man has always been developing new wants and new and more expensive ways of gratifying them. The rate of progress has sometimes been slow, and occasionally there has even been a great retrograde movement. But now we are moving on at a rapid pace that grows quicker every year, and we cannot guess where it will stop. On every side, further openings are sure to offer themselves, all of which will tend to change the character of our social and industrial life, and to enable us to turn to account vast stores of capital in providing new gratifications and new ways of economizing effort by expending it in anticipation of distant wants. There seems to be no good reason for believing that we are anywhere near a stationary state in which there will be no new important wants to be satisfied, in which there will be no more room for profitably investing present effort in providing for the future, and in which the accumulation of wealth will cease to have any reward. The whole history of man shows that his wants expand with the growth of his wealth and knowledge. And with the growth of openings for the investment of capital, there is a constant increase in that surplus of production over the necessaries of life, which gives the power to save. When the arts of production were rude, there was very little surplus, except where a strong ruling race kept the subject masses hard at work on the bare necessaries of life, and where the climate was so mild that those necessaries were small and easily obtained. But every increase in the arts of production and in the capital accumulated to assist and support labor in future production increased the surplus out of which more wealth could be accumulated. After a time, civilization became possible in temperate and even in cold climates. The increase of material wealth was possible under conditions which did not enervate the worker, and did not therefore destroy the foundations on which it rested. Thus, from step to step, wealth and knowledge have grown, and with every step, the power of saving wealth and extending knowledge has increased. The habit of distinctly realizing the future and providing for it has developed itself slowly and fitfully in the course of man's history. Travelers tell us of tribes who might double their resources and enjoyments without increasing their total labor, if they would only apply a little in advance the means that lie within their power and their knowledge, as, for instance, by fencing in their little plots of vegetables against the intrusion of wild animals. But even this apathy is perhaps less strange than the wastefulness that is found now among some classes in our own country. Cases are not rare of men who alternate between earning 2 or 3 pounds a week and being reduced to the verge of starvation. The utility of a shilling to them when they are in employment is less than that of a penny when they are out of it, and yet they never attempt to make provision for the time of need. At the opposite extreme, there are misers, in some of whom the passion for saving borders on insanity. While even among peasant proprietors and some other classes, we meet not unfrequently with people who carry thrift so far as to stint themselves of necessaries and to impair their power of future work. Thus, they lose every way. They never really enjoy life, while the income which their stored up wealth brings them is less than they would have got from the increase of their earning power if they had invested in themselves the wealth that they have accumulated in a material form. In India, and to a less extent in Ireland, we find people who do indeed abstain from immediate enjoyment and save up considerable sums with great self-sacrifice, but spend all their savings in lavish festivities at funerals and marriages. They make intermittent provision for the near future, but scarcely any permanent provision for the distant future. The great engineering works by which their productive resources have been so much increased have been made chiefly with the capital of the much less self-denying race of Englishmen. Thus, the causes which control the accumulation of wealth differ widely in different countries and different ages. They are not quite the same among any two races, and perhaps not even among any two social classes in the same race. They depend much on social and religious sanctions, and it is remarkable how, when the binding force of custom has been in any degree loosened, differences of personal character will cause neighbors brought up under like conditions to differ from one another more widely and more frequently in their habits of extravagance or thrift than in almost any other respect. The thriftlessness of early times was in a great measure due to the want of security that those who made provision for the future would enjoy it. Only those who were already wealthy were strong enough to hold what they had saved. The laborious and self-denying peasant who had heaped up a little store of wealth only to see it taken from him by a stronger hand was a constant warning to his neighbors to enjoy their pleasure and their rest when they could. The border country between England and Scotland made little progress so long as it was liable to incessant forays. There was very little saving by the French peasants in the 18th century when they could escape the plunder of the tax gatherer only by appearing to be poor, or by Irish cottiers who, on many estates, even 40 years ago, were compelled to follow the same course in order to avoid the landlord's claims of exorbitant rents. Insecurity of this kind has nearly passed away from the civilized world, but we are still suffering in England from the effects of the Poor Law, which ruled in the beginning of the last century and which introduced a new form of insecurity for the working classes. For it arranged that part of their wages should, in effect, be given in the form of poor relief, and that this should be distributed among them in inverse proportion to their industry and thrift and forethought, so that many thought it foolish to make provision for the future. The traditions and instincts which were fostered by that evil experience are even now a great hindrance to the progress of the working classes. And the principle, which nominally at least underlies the present poor law, that the state should take account only of destitution and not at all of merit, acts in the same direction, though with less force. Insecurity of this kind also is being diminished. The growth of enlightened views as to the duties of the state and of private persons towards the poor is tending to make it every day more true that those who have helped themselves and endeavored to provide for their own future will be cared for by society better than the idle and the thoughtless. But the progress in this direction is still slow, and there remains much to be done yet. The growth of a money economy and of modern habits of business does indeed hinder the accumulation of wealth by putting new temptations in the way of those who are inclined to live extravagantly. In old times, if a man wanted a good house to live in, he must build it himself. Now he finds plenty of good houses to be hired at a rent. Formerly, if he wanted good beer, he must have a good brew house. Now he can buy it more cheaply and better than he could brew it. Now he can borrow books from a library instead of buying them. And he can even furnish his house before he is ready to pay for his furniture. Thus, in many ways, the modern systems of buying and selling and lending and borrowing, together with the growth of new wants, lead to new extravagances and to a subordination of the interests of the future to those of the present. But on the other hand, a money economy increases the variety of the uses between which a person can distribute his future expenditure. A person who in a primitive state of society stores up some things against a future need may find that after all he does not need those things as much as others which he has not stored up. And there are many future wants against which it is impossible to provide directly by storing up goods. But he who has stored up capital from which he derives a money income can buy what he will to meet his needs as they arise. Again, modern methods of business have brought with them opportunities for the safe investment of capital in such ways as to yield a revenue to persons who have no good opportunity of engaging in any business, not even in that of agriculture, where the land will, under some conditions, act as a trustworthy savings bank. These new opportunities have induced some people, who would not otherwise have attempted it, to put by something for their old age. And what has had a far greater effect on the growth of wealth, it has rendered it far easier for a man to provide a secure income for his wife and children after his death. For, after all, family affection is the main motive of saving. There are indeed some who find an intense pleasure in seeing their hoards of wealth grow up under their hands, with scarcely any thought for the happiness that may be got from its use by themselves or by others. They are prompted partly by the instincts of the chase, by the desire to outstrip their rivals, by the ambition to have shown ability in getting the wealth, and to acquire power and social position by its possession. And sometimes the force of habit, started when they are really in need of money, has given them, by a sort of reflex action, an artificial and unreasoning pleasure in amassing wealth for its own sake. But were it not for the family affections, many who now work hard and save carefully would not exert themselves to do more than secure a comfortable annuity for their own lives, either by purchase from an insurance company or by arranging to spend every year, after they had retired from work, part of their capital as well as all their income. In the one case, they would leave nothing behind them. In the other, only provision for that part of their hoped-for old age from which they've been cut off by death. That men labor and save chiefly for the sake of their families and not for themselves is shown by the fact that they seldom spend, after they have retired from work, more than the income that comes in from their savings, preferring to leave their stored-up wealth intact for their families. While in this country alone, 20 millions a year are saved in the form of insurance policies and are available only after the death of those who saved them. A man can have no stronger stimulus to energy and enterprise than the hope of rising in life.
Thank you, Alfred Marshall. Okay. Now, let's talk about modern day contemporary America. America, personal financial planning. Types of common stock. Common stocks are often classified on the basis of their dividends or their rate of growth in EPS, earnings per share. Among the more popular types of common stock are blue chip, growth, tech stocks, income speculative, cyclical defensive, mid-cap and small-cap stocks. Blue chip stocks. These are the cream of the common stock crop. Blue chips are stocks that are unsurpassed in quality and have a long, stable record of earnings and dividends. They are issued by large, well-established firms that have impeccable financial credentials. Firms like GE, Walmart, Citigroup. Microsoft, 3M Co., United Parcel Service, and Pfizer. These companies hold important, if not leading positions in their industries and often determine the standards by which other firms are measured. Blue chips are particularly attractive to investors who seek high-quality investment outlets that offer decent dividend yields and respectable growth potential. Many use them for long-term investment purposes and because of their relatively low-risk exposure as a way of obtaining modest but dependable rates of return on their investment dollars. They are popular with a large segment of the investing public and as a result are often relatively high priced, especially when the market is unsettled and investors become more quality conscious. Growth stocks. Okay. Stocks that have experienced and are expected to continue experiencing consistently high rates of growth in operations and earnings are known as growth stocks. A good growth stock might exhibit a sustained rate of growth in earnings of 15 to 20% or more over a period during which common stocks are averaging only 6 to 8%. Starbucks, Lowe's, Medtronic, Harley-Davidson, Kohl's, and Boston Scientific are all prime examples of growth stocks. These stocks normally pay little or nothing in dividends because the firm's rapid growth potential requires that its earnings be retained and reinvested. The high growth expectations for these stocks usually cause them to sell at a relatively high PEV, price earnings ratio. And they typically have betas in excess of 1.0 because of their potential for dramatic price appreciation. They appeal mostly to investors who are seeking capital gains rather than dividend income. Tech stocks. Over the past 10 to 15 years, tech stocks have become such a dominant force in the market that they deserve to be put in a class all their own. Tech stocks basically represent the technology sector of the market and include all those companies that produce or provide technology-based products and services such as computers, semiconductors, data storage devices, computer software, and hardware, peripherals, internet services, content providers, networking, and wireless communications. These companies provide high-tech equipment, networking systems, and online services to all lines of businesses, schools, healthcare facilities, communications firms, governmental agencies, and home users. Although some of these stocks are listed on the New York Stock Exchange and Amex, the vast majority are traded on the NASDAQ. The American Stock Exchange, the Amex. The vast majority are traded on the NASDAQ. These stocks, in fact, dominate the NASDAQ market, and as such, the NASDAQ Composite Index and other NASDAQ measures of market performance. They were the ones that hammered especially hard during the market, that were hammered especially hard during the market fall of 2000 to 2002. When the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite fell nearly 80%. Indeed, many tech stocks fell to just pennies a share, as literally hundreds of these firms simply went out of business. But the strongest did survive, and some even thrived. As is often the case. There are literally thousands of companies that fall into the tech stock category, including from very small firms providing some service on the internet to huge multinational companies. These stocks would likely fall into either the growth stock category or the speculative stock class. Though some of them are legitimate blue chips, although tech stocks may offer the potential for attractive and, in part anyway, are probably most suitable for the more risk tolerant investor. Included in the tech stock category, you will find some big names such as Microsoft, Cisco Systems, Applied Materials, and Dell, as well as not so many big names such as BEA Systems, MDI, DIA, Introgen, Introgen, Invitrogen, KLA Tinker, and Rambus. Income stocks versus speculative. Okay, now, stocks whose appeal is based primarily on the dividends they pay out are known as income stocks. They have a fairly stable stream of earnings, a large portion of which is distributed in the form of dividends. Income shares have relatively safe and high level of current income from their investment capital. An added and often overlooked feature of these stocks is that, unlike bonds and preferred stock, holders of income stock can expect the amount of dividends paid to increase over time. Examples of income stock include JP Morgan Chase, Hershey Foods, Pitney Bowes, R.R. Donnelley, AT&T, Bank of America, and PPG Industries. Because of their low risk, these stocks commonly have betas. The beta of an investment indicates whether the investment is more or less volatile than the market as a whole. These low risk stocks, they commonly have betas of less than 1.0. Rather than basing their investment decisions on a proven record of earnings, investors in speculative stocks gamble that some new information, discovery, or production technique will favorably affect the growth of the firm and inflate the price of its stock. For example, a company whose stock is considered speculative may have recently discovered a new drug or located a valuable resource, such as oil. The value of speculative stocks and their P/E ratios, price-to-earning ratios, tend to fluctuate widely as additional information with respect to the firm's future is received. The betas for speculative stocks are nearly always all in excess of 1.0. Investors in speculative stocks should be prepared to experience losses as well as gains. Since these are high-risk securities, they include companies like P.F. Chang's China Bistro, Quicksilver, K-Swiss, Index Labs, Serena Software, and Dollar General. Cyclical stocks or defensive stocks. Cyclical stocks or defensive stocks. Stocks whose price investments tend to follow the business cycle are called cyclical stocks. This means that when the economy is in an expansionary stage, recovery, or expansion, the prices of cyclical stocks increase. And during a contractionary stage, recession or depression, they decline. Most cyclical stocks are found in the basic industries, automobiles, steel, and lumber, for example. These industries are sensitive to changes in economic activity. Investors try to purchase cyclical stocks just prior to an expansionary phase and sell just before the contraction occurs. Because they tend to move with the market, these stocks always have positive betas. Caterpillar, Genuine Parts, Maytag Corp, Rom and Haas, Alcoa, and Tinket are examples of cyclical stocks. The prices and returns from defensive stocks, unlike those of cyclical stocks, are expected to remain stable during periods of contraction in business activity. For this reason, they are called counter-cyclical. The shares of consumer goods companies, certain public utilities, and gold mining companies are good examples of defensive stocks because they are basically income stocks. Their earnings and dividends tend to hold their market prices up during periods of economic decline. Betas on these stocks are quite low and occasionally even negative. Bandag, Checkpoint Systems. Mid caps and small caps. In the stock market, stock size is based on market value, or more commonly on what is known as its market capitalization or market cap. A stock's market cap is found by multiplying its market price by the number of shares outstanding. Generally speaking, the market can be broken into three measured segments as measured by a stock's market cap. You got your small caps. These are stocks with market caps of less than $1 billion. You got your mid cap. These are market caps of $1 billion to $4 or $5 billion. Large cap, market caps of more than $4 or $5 billion. So, in addition to these three segments, another is reserved for the really small stocks, known as micro caps. Many of these stocks have market caps below $100 million, some as low as $10 to $15 million, and should only be used by investors who fully understand the risks involved and can tolerate such risk exposure. So bear that in mind. Be careful of the micro caps. Of the three major categories above, the large cap stocks are the real biggies, the Walmarts, GEs, and Microsofts of the world. Many of these are considered to be blue chip stocks, and although there are fewer large cap stocks than any of the other market cap categories, these companies account for about 80 to 90% of the total value of all U.S. equity markets. Just because they are big, however, does not mean they are better. Indeed, both the small and mid-cap segments of the market tend to hold their own with or even outperform large stocks over time. Mid-cap stocks. Mid-cap stocks are a special breed unto themselves and offer investors some very attractive return opportunities. They provide much of the sizzle of the small stock returns, but without all the price volatility. At the same time, because they are fairly good-sized companies, and many of them have been around for a long time, they offer some of the safety of the big established stocks. Among the ranks of the mid-caps are such well-known companies as Tootsie Roll, Wendy's International, Barnes & Noble, PetSmart, and the Cheesecake Factory, in addition to some not-so-well-known names. For the most part, although these securities offer a nice alternative to large stocks without all the drawbacks and uncertainty of small caps, they probably are most appropriate for investors who are willing to tolerate a bit more risk and price volatility. Some investors consider small companies to be in a class by themselves. They believe these firm stocks hold especially attractive return opportunities, which in many cases has turned out to be true. Known as small cap stocks, these companies generally have annual revenues of less than $250 million And because of their size, spurts of growth can have dramatic effects on their earnings and stock prices. Green Mountain Power, Hancock Fabrics, Hot Topic, Joann Stores, and Sonic Corp are just some of the better known small cap stocks. Now, although some small cap stocks, like Sonic, for example, are solid companies with equally solid financials, that is definitely not the case with most of them. Indeed, because many of these companies are so small, they do not have a lot of stock outstanding and their shares are not widely traded. In addition, small company stocks have a tendency to be here today, gone tomorrow, although some of these stocks may hold the potential for high returns. Investors should also be aware of the very high risk exposure that comes with many of them. Moving on. All right, we got market globalization and the allure of foreign stocks. Globalization, pretty timely. It's a word that's been being thrown around a lot lately. Let's talk a little bit about that. In addition to all the different types of stocks mentioned above, a growing number of American investors are turning to foreign markets as a way to earn attractive returns. Such securities became increasingly popular during the 1980s and 1990s. And many investment advisors today recommend that investors put at least part of their capital into foreign stocks. A good deal of this interest has come about as advances in technology and communications, together with the gradual elimination of political and regulatory barriers, have allowed investors to make cross-border securities transactions with relative ease. Because of these changes, not only are more and more Americans beginning to invest in foreign securities, but foreign investors are becoming major players in U.S. markets as well. The net result is a rapidly growing trend toward market globalization, whereby investing is priced on an international scale rather than confined to a single domestic market. Ironically, as our world is becoming smaller, our universe of investment opportunities is growing by leaps and bounds. Consider, for example, that in 1970, the U.S. stock market accounted for fully two-thirds of the world market. In essence, our stock market was twice as big as all the rest of the world's stock markets combined. That is no longer true. For 2002, the U.S. share of the world equity market has dropped to less than 50%. Okay, and that is a 2002 number, and I am not satisfied with that. I feel like I'm cheating you, the audience, if I don't try to get more current reading here. Okay, so we're looking at the U.S. share of the world equity market. Let's ask Google. In 2002, okay, I dropped to less than 50%. Come on, baby. Google. All right, got the U.S. share. Of oh, the U.S. share of Okay, let's share of the world equity market. World equity market. Well, okay. What do we got here? Okay, 2018. Okay, 53% of world stocks. What capital? All right. Anyway, the point remains the same, and that is uh, the other markets are rapidly gaining in size. Okay, so in 2002, the U.S. share of the world equity market had dropped to less than 50%. I think today it's probably right at around 50.3%. Okay, today the world equity markets are dominated by just 6 countries, which together account for about 80% of the total market. You got the United States, by far has the biggest equity market. In second place was Japan, at about 1/3 the size of the U.S. market. Closely followed by the UK. Rounding out the list was Germany, France, and Canada. Canada. Need more coffee. In addition to these 6, another dozen or so markets such as Switzerland, Australia, India, Italy, Singapore, and Hong Kong are also regarded as major world players, not to mention a number of relatively small emerging markets. Oh, shoot. Such as Mexico, South Korea, Thailand, and Russia. Thus, investors who continue all their investing to the U.S. markets are missing out on a big chunk of the worldwide investment opportunities. Not only that, they are missing out on some very attractive returns as well. Over the 23-year period from 1980 through 2002, the U.S. stock market provided the highest annual return just once in 1982, and that statistic pertains to just the 8 largest major markets of the world. It does not include the smaller emerging markets that in recent years have provided some spectacular returns. Of course, it also ignores some spectacular crashes that have occurred recently in these same emerging markets. So, if you are looking for better returns, you might want to give some thought to investing in foreign stocks. There are several different ways of doing that. Without a doubt, from the perspective of an individual investor, the best and easiest way is through international mutual funds. Mutual funds aside, you could, of course, buy securities directly in the foreign markets. Investing directly is not for the uninitiated, however, for although most major U.S. brokerage houses are set up to accommodate investors interested in buying foreign shares, many logistical problems still have to be faced. Fortunately, there is an easier way, and that is to buy foreign securities that are denominated in dollars and traded directly on U.S. exchanges. One such investment vehicle is the American Depository Receipt, ADR. ADRs are just like common stock, except that each ADR represents a specific number of shares in a specific foreign company. Indeed, the shares of more than 1,000 companies from some 50 foreign countries are traded on U.S. exchanges as ADRs. Companies like Sony, Ericsson, Telephone, Nokia, Vodafone, AirTouch, Shanghai Petrochemicals, and Grupo Televisa. Grupo Televisa. To mention just a few, ADRs are a great way to invest in foreign stocks because they are bought and sold on American markets, just like stocks in U.S. companies. And their prices are quoted in dollars, not British pounds, Swiss francs, or euros. Furthermore, all dividends are paid in dollars. Okay, smart sites. Everything you ever wanted to know about ADRs is at JP Morgan's ADR site, ADR.com, where you'll find general information about the ADR market and can search by company, region, or industry. Whereas the temptation to go after higher returns may be compelling, keep one thing in mind when investing in foreign stocks. That is, whether investing in foreign securities directly or through something like ADRs, the whole process of investing involves a lot more risk. That is because the behavior of foreign currency exchange rates plays a vital role in defining returns to U.S. investors. As the U.S. dollar becomes weaker or stronger relative to the currency in which the foreign security is denominated, the returns to U.S. investors from investing in foreign securities will increase or decrease accordingly. Currency exchange rates can, in fact, have a dramatic impact on investor returns and quite often can convert mediocre returns or even losses into very attractive returns, and vice versa. Only one thing really determines whether the impact is going to be positive or negative, and that is the behavior of the US dollar relative to the currency in which the foreign security is denominated. In effect, a stronger dollar has a negative impact on total returns to US investors, and a weaker dollar has a positive impact. Thus, other things being equal, the best time to be in foreign securities is when the dollar is falling, because that increases returns to US investors. Smart sites. There's a smart site coming up for you. A good source for overseas business news and research on stocks, not listed on US exchanges, is the Financial Times website. It's totally free, by the way. FT.com. I think they might have a premium. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of it's free. They might have a premium section as well that you can go to. But there's a lot of free stuff, a lot of valuable free stuff there too as well. I don't know if that's an oxymoron or not. How could something that's valuable be free? Well, how indeed. Selecting a stock. You want an investment that provides attractive rate of return, one that meets or exceeds your required return. So how do you go about selecting such a stock? The answer is by doing a little digging and crunching a few numbers. Here is what you will want to do. To begin with, find a company you like and then take a look at how it has performed over the past 3 to 5 years. Find out what kind of growth rate in sales it has experienced, if it has a strong ROE, and has been able to maintain or improve its profit margin, how much it has been paying out to stockholders in the form of dividends, and so forth. This kind of information is readily available in publications like Value Line, and S&P, stock reports, or online at a number of sites. The idea is to find stocks that are financially strong, have done well in the past, and continue to be market leaders or hold prominent positions in a given industry or market segment. Looking at the past is only the beginning, however. What is really important to stock valuation is the future. That is, the value of a share of stock at any point in time is a function of future returns, not past performance. So let's turn our attention to the expected future performance of a stock. The idea is to assess the outlook for the stock, thereby gaining some insight about the benefits to be derived from investing in it. Of particular concern are future dividends and share price behavior. As a rule, it does not make much sense. It does not make much sense to go out more than 2 or 3 years because the accuracy of most forecasts begins to deteriorate rapidly after that point. Thus, using a 3-year investment horizon, you would want to forecast annual dividends per share for each of the next 3 years, plus the future price of the stock at the end of the 3-year holding period. Obviously, if the price of the stock is projected to go up over time, you will take some capital gains. You could try to generate these forecasts yourself, or you can look to a publication like Value Line to obtain projections. Value Line projects dividends and share prices 3 to 5 years into the future. Once you have projected dividends and share price, you can use the approximate yield equation or a handheld calculator to determine the expected return from the investment. To see how that can be done, consider the common shares of Medtronic Inc., the world's largest manufacturer of implantable biomedical devices. According to Value Line, the company has very strong financials. Its sales have been growing at around 15 to 16% per year for the first 5 years. It has a net profit margin of more than 20% and an ROE return of equity of around 20%. These are 2005 numbers. Thus, but the point remains the same here. Thus, historically, the company has performed very well and is definitely a market leader in its field. In June of 2003, the stock was trading at around $49 a share and was paying annual dividends at the rate of about 30 cents a share. Value Line was projecting dividends to go up about 58 cents a share within the next 3 to 5 years. They were also estimating the price of the stock could rise to as high as $80 a share within 3 years. Okay, this is something I could probably look up pretty quickly. Okay, what is okay, we're looking at the hell company was this? Oh, Medtronic. Common shares of Medtronic Inc. Common shares of Medtronic Inc. Of Medtronic Inc. Little guy here. Oh shoot, it's at 99.25 now, baby. That's pretty good. What look at here. Okay, so they're doing quite well actually. So it's up a lot. What was I saying it was? Yeah, that was okay. So that was in 2002. Right, 2003 was around $49 a share. Dividends at the rate of about 30 cents a share. Value Line was projecting dividends to go up about 58 cents a share within the next 3 to 5 years. They were also estimating the price. So, yeah, that was long. I mean, stocks could go as high as $80 per share within 3 years. That was okay. That was back in 2003. So, yeah. So now we're looking at $99.25 a share, $99.25 a share. So not too shabby. Not too shabby indeed. So, all right. Okay, so using these value line projections and giving dividends, current dividends in 2003. Okay, what are the current dividends here? Shares, current dividends of it. P ratio, low market cap, 29. Okay. Current dividends. Dividends. Dividends of Medtronic Inc. Current TTM dividend payout for Medtronic Inc. as of July 11, 2019 is $2.16. That's 2.16%. And 58 cents a share in 2006. Assuming, of course, yeah, just looking at like what we're at now, we're at $2.16 a share, the dividend. So in 2019, so that's pretty good. All right, pretty good growth. So if you would have bought Medtronic back then and said would have stayed invested with them the whole time, you'd be doing quite well right now. Hope you did it. Hope you're one of the lucky few. Okay, let's see here. Okay, running low on battery. It's not good, man. Not good at all, baby. Okay, so what do we got here? Using these, okay, 30 cent. Okay, we're talking about the dividends. Assuming, of course, that dividends do in fact grow as estimated by Value Line, which they did. Now, because the approximate yield equation uses average annual current income as one of the inputs. Let's use the midpoint of our projected dividends, 47 cents a share, as a proxy for average annual dividends. In addition, given this stock is currently trading at $49 a share, has a projected price of $80 per share, and we have a 3-year investment horizon, we find our expected return as follows. Okay, well, I had a whole equation here written out, but not going to really play well over the radio, so let's see here. Notice if Medtronic's, this might be a good explanation of it. If Medtronic stock performs as expected, which it would, which again, the source material was taken from, that's one reason I like taking this older source material sometimes, just to see how it played out over time. This actually played out quite well. So thus, what you can bear in mind, this was written back around 2000, or the source material that I'm using was written around 2003. Thus, if Medtronic stock performs as expected, it should provide us with a return of around 17 or 18%. In today's market, that would be a very attractive return. and one that very likely will exceed our required rate of return, which probably should be around 12 to 15%. If that is the case, then this stock very definitely should be considered a viable investment candidate. According to our standards, the stock is currently undervalued and thus should be given a serious consideration as a possible addition to our portfolio. All right, well, that prediction panned out quite well. So, only if we could all jump in our time machines and go back to 2003, 2004, whatever, and buy Medtronic stock, it would be a Merry Christmas for everyone. All right, moving on. Okay. Okay, timing your investments. Once you find a stock you think you will that will give you the kind of return you are looking for, you are ready to deal with the matter of timing your investment. As long as the prospects for the market and the economy are positive, the time may be right to invest in stocks. On the other hand, there are a couple of conditions when investing in stocks does not make any sense at all. In particular, do not invest in stocks if you feel very strongly that the market is headed down in the short run. If you are absolutely certain the market is in for a big fall or will continue to fall, if it is already doing so, then wait until the market drops and buy the stock when it is cheaper. Okay, do not invest in stocks if you feel uncomfortable with the general tone of the market. We'll make the baby comfortable. It lacks direction, or there is way too much price volatility to suit you. For example, this became a problem prior to and after the October 1987 crash, when computer-assisted trading started taking over the market. The result was a stock market that behaved more like a commodities market, with an intolerable amount of price volatility. When this happens, fundamentals go out the window, and the market simply becomes too risky. Do what the pros do and wait it out on the sidelines. Why invest in stocks? There are three basic reasons for investing in common stock. 1, to use the stock as a warehouse of value. 2, to accumulate capital. And 3, to provide a source of income. Storage of value is important to all investors because nobody likes to lose money. However, some investors are more concerned about it than others and therefore put safety of principle first in their stock selection process. These investors are more quality conscious and tend to gravitate toward blue chips and other non-speculative shares. Accumulation of capital generally is an important goal to individuals with long-term investment horizons. These investors use the capital gains and dividends that stocks provide to build up their wealth. Some use growth stocks for such purposes, others do it with income shares. Still others use a little of both. Finally, some people use stocks as a source of income. To them, a dependable flow of dividends is essential. High-yielding, good quality income shares are usually their preferred investment vehicle. All right, financial road sign. Clubbing your way to better investing. This is, a pretty important little segment here. And when I said clubbing, I'm talking about investment clubs. An investment club can teach you to become a more successful investor. These small groups of investors pool their resources and jointly decide what securities to buy. To start your own club, invite 10 to 20 people to an organizational meeting. Discuss which investing goals potential members share. Agree on an investment strategy for the club. Write a mission statement that describes the group's investment philosophy. Determine the organizational structure and develop a framework for investment decisions. Decide on the amount of each member's initial investment and monthly contributions. Remember that the club is a business with your money at risk and operate it accordingly. Make meetings fun as well as educational. It is important to outline clearly the expectations for members, such as active participation and regular attendance at meetings, and researching stocks thoroughly before recommending them. For more information on starting and running an investment club, visit the National Association of Investment Clubs at better-investing.org. better-investing.org. Check it out. It's a really good resource. I mean, if you care about your money, that is. If you don't, then fine. Just keep pissing it away. I don't care. But no, I take that back. I do care. That's why I'm here, ladies and gentlemen. Because I care about you. Advantages and disadvantages of stock ownership. Ownership of common stock has both advantages and disadvantages. Its advantages are threefold. First, the potential returns in the form of both dividend income and price appreciation can be quite substantial. Second, many stocks are actively traded stocks. Thus, they are a highly liquid form of investment, meaning they can be quickly bought and sold. Finally, they do not involve any direct management or unusual management problems, and market company information is usually widely published and readily available. Risk. The problem of timing purchases and sales and the uncertainty of dividends are all disadvantages of common stock ownership. Although potential common stock ownership, even though, okay, I fucked that sentence up. Even though careful selection of stocks may reduce the amount of risk to which the investor is exposed, the risk-return trade-off cannot be completely eliminated. In other words, high returns on common stock are not guaranteed. They may or may not occur depending on numerous economic, industry, and company factors. The timing of purchases and sales is closely related to risk. Many investors purchase a stock, hold it for a period of time during which the price drops, and then sell it below the original purchase price. That is, at a loss. The proper strategy, of course, is to buy low and sell high. But the problem of predicting price movements makes it difficult to implement such a plan. Okay, so be sure to plow back your earnings. Unless you are living off the income, the basic investment objective with stocks is the same as it is with any other security: to earn an attractive, fully compounded rate of return. This requires regular reinvestment of dividend income. And there is no better way to accomplish such reinvestment than through a dividend reinvestment plan, a DRP. The basic investment philosophy at work here is that if the company is good enough to invest in, it is good enough to reinvest in. In a dividend reinvestment plan, shareholders can sign up to have their cash dividends automatically reinvested in additional shares of the company's common stock. In essence, it is like taking your cash dividends in the form of more shares of common stock. The idea is to put your money to work by building up your investment in the stock. Such an approach can have a tremendous impact on your investment decision over time. So, yeah, cash or reinvested dividends. Participating in a dividend reinvestment plan is a simple yet highly effective way of building up capital over time. Over the long haul, it can prove to be a great way of earning a fully compounded rate of return on your money. Okay, today over 1,000 companies, including most major corporations, have DRPs, and each one provides investors with a convenient and inexpensive way to accumulate capital. Stocks in most DRPs are acquired free of any brokerage commissions, and most plans allow partial participation. That is, rather than committing all their cash dividends to these plans, participants may specify a portion of their shares for dividend reinvestment and receive cash dividends on the rest. Some plans even sell stocks to their DRP investors at below market prices, often at discounts of 3 to 5%. In addition, most plans credit fractional shares to the investors' accounts. Shareholders can join these plans simply by sending in a completed authorization form to the company. Once in the plan, the number of shares you hold will begin to accumulate with each dividend date. There is a catch, however. Even though these dividends take the form of additional shares of stock, reinvested dividends are taxable in the year they are received, just as they have been received in cash. So you got to bear that in mind. Tax man wants his money, and he's going to get it. Uncle Sam wants his tax money. And he is a jealous God. Okay. Investing in bonds. In contrast to stocks, bonds are liabilities. They are nothing more than publicly traded IOUs, where but gentlemen prefer bonds, right? Okay. They are nothing more than publicly traded IOUs where the bondholders are actually lending money to the issuer. They represent borrowed funds and, as such, are a form of debt capital. Bonds are often referred to as fixed income securities because the debt service obligations of the issuer are fixed. That is, the issuing organization agrees to pay a fixed amount of interest periodically and to repay a fixed amount of principal at or before maturity. Bonds normally have face values of $1,000 or $5,000 and maturities of 10 to 30 years or more. There, you see that? You hear that? That's the sound of my interest earning me money while I just sit here. That is the sound of the magic of compound interest. Making money for you. Why invest in bonds? What does this have to do with compound interest? Okay, anyway. the moral of the story is you should always have your money wrapped up in something. Bonds are a good place to store money. I guess it's debatable. But anyway, all right. So why invest in bonds? Why would you want to do that? Well, like many other types of investment vehicles, bonds provide investors with two kinds of income. One, they provide a generous amount of current income, and two, they can often be used to generate substantial capital gains. The current income, of course, is derived from the interest payments received periodically over the life of the issue. Indeed, this regular and highly predictable source of income is one of the key factors that draws investors to bonds. But these securities can also produce capital gains, which occurs whenever market interest rates fall. A basic trading rule in the bond market is that interest rates and bond prices move in opposite directions. When interest rates rise, bond prices fall, and when they drop, bond prices rise. Thus, it is possible to buy bonds. Oh, we got going right here. Okay. It is possible to buy bonds at one price, and if interest rate conditions are right, to sell them sometime later at a higher price. Of course, it is also possible to incur capital loss should market rates move against the investor. Taken together, the current income and capital gains earned from bonds can lead to highly competitive investor returns. Bonds are also a highly versatile investment outlet. They can be used conservatively by those who seek high current income or aggressively by those who actively go after capital gains. Although bonds have long been considered as attractive investments by those going after high levels of current income, it has only been since the advent of volatile interest rates that they have also become recognized for their capital gains potential and as trading vehicles. Indeed, given the relationship between bond prices to interest rates, investors found that the number of profitable trading opportunities increased substantially as wider and more frequent swings in interest rates began to occur. Finally, because of the general high quality of many bond issuers, so nowadays we have, finally, because of the general high quality of many bond issues, they can also be used for the preservation and long-term accumulation of capital. In fact, some individuals regularly and over the long haul commit all or a good deal of their investment funds to bonds because of this attribute. All right, so it's the end of the big show. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Not quite sure when the next podcast / YouTube thing is going to happen, but you want to keep an eye out for that. In the next show, we're going to do more of, I want to end my stream here. I want to end that stream.